Also in the news this week, Greg, some pretty exciting news. From Wednesday this week, all first home buyers will only need a 5% deposit to buy a house. So the federal government is going to act as a guarantor for the remainder of the 20% deposit. And then the price caps for these loans is also increasing from what they were. It's different depending on where you live. In Canberra, here it was $750,000 max you could borrow. Now it's up to $1 million. Shows how much house prices have gone up.
in Canberra, yeah.
And also the income cap has been removed. So I guess no matter how much you earn, you'll be able to apply for this 5% loan. Greg, first question. Is this going to push up house prices even more?
Well, I thought the first question was, can Eleanor now buy a house?
I mean, maybe.
And it's a case of, do you really want to?
I mean, this is what I need you.
Do you want to take out
unpack
a
this for me.
95% loan on your
with
house,
the
essentially?
Federal government acting as a guarantor. What?
Yeah.
What
Look,
does this mean?
First things first, all this is a kind of sneaky way of doing a first home buyer's grant. That's really all it is. Because when you think of what a first home buyer's grant was it give you $10,000, $20,000, whatever, when you bought your home so you could pay your deposit.
Yep.
And what this is saying, we're not going to give you cash. We're just going to lower the amount that you need to borrow for that deposit. You know, you only need you can borrow 90% instead of maybe 90% or 80%. You know, because the standard was always sort of borrow. You know, deposit should be around 20%.
I think you said you can borrow 90% instead of 90%.
Did I?
Did I miss that?
So what this is saying is instead of giving you cash up front, they're saying, well, that deposit is actually lower than you otherwise it used to be. It used to be, let's say, you needed to come up with a deposit that was 20% of the value of your home. Now they're saying, oh, you only need 5%.
Yeah, you don't have to save up quite so much. Yeah.
And the reason being because first-home buyers traditionally needed that 20%, otherwise the banker's going, yeah, we don't really trust you because you don't have many assets. You know, if you've got a house and you're borrowing against that to buy another house, you don't need really any deposit at all because if you can't buy your loan, don't worry, we've got to take your house. You know?
Don't worry.
Whereas because don't have any assets as a first home buyer, or certainly no assets the size of a house, you generally needed that 20% or 15 maybe if the bank was generous, and you also had to take out insurance and things like that, which added to the cost. The government saying, no, you only need 5%, will basically guarantee your loan. I'm not too worried about that, but what I'm worried about is like first home buyer grants. All this does is create more demand in the economy. People go, oh, now I can afford to buy a home. Great, I'm going out bidding for a home. Well, you got more people bidding for a home. What happens to the price of that house? In an auction, it goes up. So, you know, it might end up really with those people who were close to buying a home being able to buy it maybe a few months earlier than they otherwise would have, but it's not going to be a massive game changer for people who are looking at house prices, looking at their rent they're paying, going, I'm never going to get there.
Yep.
You know, and in fact, the worry is that it's going to make it harder for those people because it's actually going to give another surge to house prices. And if you read numerous news reports.
I mean, I saw some headlines this week that were from, investors rushing in to buy houses before this scheme was introduced. And I was like, oh, brilliant.
Yeah,
Even more
not a good sign, is it? You know.
Yeah.
It's not, the government is at pains to say, oh, this will enable more people to buy a home. And they're not following through that line of if there's more people trying to buy a home all at the same time because they've all been given this same deal, which means everyone knows they've got more money to bid for on their home. Well, clearly that's going to raise house prices. So this is just the problem with housing policy for the last 25 years. Overwhelmingly, it's been about juicing demand and saying, oh, it's really expensive to buy a home. We'll give you some more money so you can buy that home. And that just adds to the price. And here it's, we'll make it easier for you to borrow So that just means they've got more money to bid on a home. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
I
mean, not to make you repeat yourself, but even though I always do, what should the government be doing instead?
Well, for a start, stop doing what you've been doing for the last 25 years. Get rid of the 50% capital gains discount. 50% discounts should only be for revenue summits and not for buying a house. And, because that clearly turned the housing market into a bit of a casino, a very lucrative and tax-benefited casino.
Yeah, but a casino where the people coming in win, not just the house.
And they kind of, it was almost impossible to lose because while you were buying a home on the expectation that the value of the house is going to go up or the property is going to go up, and while you're waiting for that, you rent it out and negative gear it and reduce your tax in the meantime, and then when the value of the house or property has gone up enough, you can sell it and get a 50% tax discount. So you're winning both ways. So got to get rid of that. Also, as we've often been saying here at the Institute, yes, supply is a massive issue, and a big aspect of the supply problem is the public sector is largely absent. It used to be 10 to 15% of new homes were in the public sector.
And by that you mean public housing?
Yeah, public housing. Governments, state governments, federal governments borrow at your very low interest rates that governments can borrow, a lot lower than we can borrow at, build homes, provide them for people who need homes, whether it's to rent, whether it's rent to buy, low, middle income. They can even make them for, middle to high income, especially if you're, a public servant or you're working as a teacher, a nurse, or things like that. As Richard Dennis says, we've got Defence Force housing. Why not nurses housing? Why not, education housing Australia?
Or
just housing Australia. We can do these things. We choose instead to come up with all these funds and schemes of ways in doing what should be obvious of borrow, build, provide.
Yeah, well, you know what? I give up. I mean, yeah, if all of these sort of housing schemes are just going to continue to push up house prices, maybe I will never afford a house.
Yeah, I mean, the real catch for any politician is if you ask them, is the purpose of this housing policy to lower house prices, or is it to make house prices go up? And they will twist themselves in knots to point out that, oh no, we don't want house prices to fall, or we don't want house prices to go up slower than incomes. And yet, if it ain't doing any of those things, housing affordability is not improving. That's the only way you can improve housing affordability is house prices, dwelling prices go up slower than incomes. And this policy, unfortunately, is not going to do that.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.